نور المفضل.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. Our cover story remains Afghanistan, and it's a story that's developing every hour. Our team in Kabul has been traveling across the country, sending dispatches and not very encouraging news, I'm afraid. 18 provincial capitals have fallen. President Ghani's position looks untenable. The fall of Kabul looks like a matter of time. Western powers are sending troops not to help the Afghans but to evacuate their own citizens safely. The Americans are trying to strike a deal with the Taliban to spare their embassy. This is a so-called superpower negotiating with terrorists, asking them to spare their embassy. America has seen many lows, but few match this. Its top ally, the UK, says the withdrawal was a mistake, a realization that has come too late. Meanwhile, the Chinese are wasting no time. This is their plan: recognize the Taliban as rulers if Kabul falls. This is a new axis of evil taking shape. The Taliban, China and Pakistan, and their first target, make no mistake, will be India. China and Pakistan are already blaming India for terror attacks on Pakistani soil. We'll tell you all about it. Also on the show tonight, China rejects a second WHO probe into the origin of the Wuhan virus. The World Health Organization sought raw data from Wuhan. China denied, saying it supports scientific, not political efforts. America's white population shrank for the first time, even as racism continues to rise. Significant findings of the U.S. race census. In Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apparently wants a snap poll a full 2 years before his term expires. Opposition says it's selfish and dangerous in the middle of a rising COVID wave. And don't blame your metabolism for your middle-age weight. A new study finds adult metabolism does not begin to slow until the age of 60. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
In a rare shooting incident in the English city of Plymouth, a man shot dead 5 people, including a 3-year-old girl. The police believe this was a case of domestic-related violence. The rampage was the worst such incident in more than a decade. The US has authorized a booster shot of COVID-19 jabs from Pfizer and Moderna to those with compromised immune systems as the country sees a surge in Delta variant cases. The US's top infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci says more children are likely to get infected with the virus. Russia reports a record high of 815 coronavirus-related deaths in a single day, attributed to the more contagious Delta variant. Meanwhile, Moscow's mayor relaxes restrictions, saying hospitalizations have halved in the last few weeks. The latest mutation of coronavirus, Lambda, will not be slowed down by vaccines, says a new study. The yet-to-be peer-reviewed study says the Lambda variant found in South America is as virulent as the Delta variant. Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman J.Y. Lee walks out of prison on parole, with the South Korean President Moon Jae-in saying that the decision to release him was in the national interest. Lee was convicted of bribery and embezzlement. Russia's security agents have detained the head of an institute researching hypersonic flight on suspicion of treason. 73-year-old Alexander Kuranov will be held in custody for 2 months. Researchers in Stockholm have come across a 40,000-year-old frozen mummy of an extinct cave lion cub that they claim is the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found. Backed by the positive global cues and ample liquidity in the system, Indian markets touch record highs again, with Sensex crossing the 50,000 mark for the first time ever. England have fought back on the second day of the Lord's Test to dismiss India for 364 runs in the first innings. The visitors had reached 276 for 3 after day 1. But lost overnight Centurion K.L. Rahul and Ajinkya Rahane early in the first session. Rishabh Pant and Ravindra Jadeja added 49 for the 6th wicket, but from there, the end was swift. James Anderson picked up the 31st 5-wicket haul of his career, while Ollie Robinson and Mark Wood claimed 2 scalps each. Great Britain are set to lose the silver medal they won behind Italy in the men's 4x100-meter relay at the Tokyo Olympics after one of the quartet failed a dope test. Sprinter CJ Yuta, who ran the opening leg of the relay, has tested positive for the anabolic steroid Ostarine and has been suspended. Stipulate that the result of the entire team will be disqualified in case even a single athlete tests positive during the games. Canada are set to be upgraded to silver, while China will be upgraded to bronze.
I want to start tonight with a picture. This is in Herat. What you see are Taliban terrorists. What are they doing? They're driving, dodging cars. It's a metaphor for what's happening right now. The Taliban are taking their country for a ride. A crash is inevitable and the world is standing by and watching. Do you know at what speed they're going? They've taken control of 18 provincial capitals in 8 days. How many provincial capitals does Afghanistan have? 34. So in just 8 days, the terrorists have taken 18 out of 34. In the last 24 hours alone, 2 big cities have fallen, Herat and Kandahar, the second and the third largest cities of Afghanistan. They're now under terrorist control. And it's not just the cities that are falling. Today we received reports that the Salma Dam too has fallen to the Taliban. This is the same dam that was gifted by India to Afghanistan. In 2016, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Afghan President Ashraf Ghani jointly inaugurated this dam. It was built at a cost of $300 million. A social media account believed to be affiliated to the Taliban posted this today. It says members of the Afghan National Army who were guarding this dam surrendered today and joined the Taliban. If confirmed, this is the biggest blow to Indian investments in this country, in Afghanistan, and this may just be the beginning. Because across the country, security forces are reportedly surrendering. They're allowing the Taliban a free run. This was Kandahar today. The Taliban taking a victory lap. They climbed onto an armoured vehicle and drove through the Martyrs' Square in the city. This is what Afghanistan looks like today. Going by new estimates, the Taliban control 65% of the country. The provinces in red are Taliban territory. What about the rest? Well, fighting is underway in the rest of these areas. With their latest victories, the Taliban now control southern Afghanistan and the entire western border with Iran. They've also captured nearly all of northern Afghanistan. So what is left? Total control of the country, that's what they want now. Can the civilian government push back? They are at their weakest at the moment. The Afghan government effectively controls only 2 cities and is fighting hard to keep a third one. Kabul and Jalalabad are in the government's hand, and they're fighting to keep Mazar-e-Sharif. The city is under siege. A team from WION traveled to Mazar-e-Sharif earlier this week. We found it surrounded by the Taliban. What about the cities the government has lost? The president had a plan to regain them. He wanted to rope in local warlords. That may not happen because the plan has failed even before it took off. The warlords are losing too, some of them joining the Taliban. Let me tell you what happened in Herat. The Taliban detained veteran militia commander Mohammad Ismail Khan. The man known as the Lion of Herat. He battled the Soviets in the 1980s. He was also a member of the Northern Alliance that toppled the Taliban in 2001 with America's help. In recent weeks, the same Ismail Khan has been leading a group of fighters against the Taliban. Today he lost. Our correspondent Siddhant Sibal managed to have a brief conversation with him, and you won't believe what he told us. The Lion of Herat has joined the Taliban himself.
Hello, is this Ismail Khan? Is this Ismail Khan?
Yes.
Sir, have you joined Taliban?
Yes, I'm now in the Herat city.
But sir, have you joined Taliban?
Yes.
Sir, are you safe now? Right now?
Sorry.
Are you safe right now? Sir,
Yes.
are you safe right now?
The Afghan government has suffered a string of failures. The Taliban are winning, the Western forces are leaving. Ghani fired his army chief this week. But can he keep his own chair? The Taliban say his exit is a prerequisite for talks. The Pakistani Prime Minister and the unofficial spokesperson of the Taliban said they won't negotiate until the Afghan president resigns. The Afghan government seems to be cracking under pressure. There are names doing the rounds for Ghani's replacement. Top of the list is Dr. Abdullah, the chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation. Now, if this change happens, it will be extremely unfortunate. To make a president step down because the terrorists demand it is shameful capitulation, to say the least. And this is what it has come to. The situation is alarming. Yesterday, the Indian embassy in Kabul issued another security advisory, the second one in 2 days, urging Indian citizens to leave immediately. Indian diplomats in Kabul are also in touch with members of the Hindu and Sikh community in Afghanistan. Yesterday, the Ministry of External Affairs in India said it will provide all necessary assistance to them. 20 years of war. And this is what the Western forces have to show for it. A terror group is on a rampage, and world powers are watching helplessly, hoping to strike a deal, even if that means throwing the Afghan government and people under the bus. Every crime has 2 offenders: the people who commit the offense and the people who stand by and let them. Like the so-called Western Crusaders in Afghanistan, they came for a war on terror. Instead, they're beating the retreat of shame. 20 years back, no one asked them to invade Afghanistan. They did it anyway. Today, the situation is quite the opposite. Afghans are dying every day. Their cities have been overrun by the Taliban. They're crying for international help. And what does the West do? Look the other way. Their objectives in Afghanistan have changed. They don't care about a Taliban takeover. They're concerned about their own people stuck in the country. So they are sending troops. 3,000 American soldiers are heading to Afghanistan. What's their mission? To partially evacuate the US embassy in Kabul. Does it really take 3,000 soldiers to evacuate an embassy? It doesn't. But Washington is spooked. They fear the Taliban may try to take Kabul, so 3,000 troops are an insurance against the same terrorists they signed a deal with. Britain is doing the same. They're sending 600 soldiers to Afghanistan, not to help the Afghans, but to oversee the exit of British nationals. Have you ever heard the term, abandon the ship? Well, this is it. Afghanistan is sinking, so the Western nations are saving their own people and jumping ship. Not everyone agrees. It is the right call, though. Britain, for instance, is having an epiphany. Their defense secretary has called the US withdrawal a mistake. He says the deal signed in Doha was rotten.
I think that deal that was done in Doha was a rotten deal, I'm on the record as saying, because what it effectively told a Taliban that wasn't winning, that they were winning, and it undermined the government of Afghanistan. And now we're in this position where the Taliban have clearly the momentum across the country. And instead of the political process working...
Great assessment. Just 531 days too late. Why didn't London oppose the deal before? Why did they rush to pull out soldiers? Simple answer. They did what the Americans did. The United States was leading the war. They were bankrolling this coalition. So when the Americans left, everyone else followed. Because why have an independent foreign policy when you can hang on to America's coattails? Which brings us to Joe Biden. The US president is proving to be a great spin doctor. He says there cannot be a military solution in Afghanistan. In other words, he has lost the war, and Biden now wants a political solution to the conflict. Unfortunately, that's also a dead end. Ambassadors from the US, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, the UK, Qatar and China met for talks in Doha. They were supposed to ease the deadlock. What we got instead was a generic joint statement. Let me tell you what were the key takeaways from the Doha Talks, the much-hyped Doha Talks. Number one, a military takeover of Kabul will not be recognized. Number two, a permanent and immediate ceasefire. And number three, concrete proposals from both sides. Sounds like a very ambitious proposal, but here's the problem. The world still sees the Taliban as a genuine negotiating partner. It wants concrete proposals from terrorists. This is not optimism, this is delusion. And as for recognizing a Taliban regime, we know how brittle these promises are. Pakistan recognized a Taliban government once. They'll do it again. Reports say China may also do the same. What about the Americans? The Americans are seeking new deals with the Taliban, private deals between the US and the Taliban. Guess one betrayal was not enough. Washington knows Kabul will soon be attacked. And what is the one demand that they make? Spare the US embassy. That's what they're asking the Taliban to do. Rain fire all around, just keep away from our gates. Special envoy Zalmay Khalilzad wants the Taliban to agree to this demand of the Americans. You see, this has been America's problem right from the start. When they invaded, they consulted no one. When they waged war, they consulted no one. When they fled, they consulted no one. America's so-called settlements have excluded the Afghan government. That's why the Taliban are running riot and why the Doha talks are an absolute failure. Of course, Washington does not see it that way. This is what the White House spokesperson said about the Afghan army. They have what they need. What they need to determine is whether they have the political will to fight back. What is America trying to say here? That Afghans don't have the appetite for war? The fact is, Afghans don't have what they need to fight without US soldiers on the ground. American airstrikes are ineffective. And even those will stop by the end of this month. What about Afghanistan's own air force? It's almost entirely composed of American technology. And to operate and service them, Afghanistan needs US military contractors. Just one tiny problem. These contractors were the first ones to flee. They're back home sipping margaritas on the East Coast. The Afghans can fend for themselves. The US pushed Afghanistan off the deep end. They did not spend money on Afghanistan. They dumped money, not knowing where it was going or how it was being used. American presidents played checkers with the fate of millions of Afghans. When they lost, they flipped the board and bolted. The Taliban today may be holding the knife, but don't forget, America had the gun. And the world sees what America has done here, America's blunders, criminal mistakes. Even US allies are questioning it now. The British Defence Secretary has called the withdrawal a mistake. Earlier today, I spoke to Tom Tugendhat. He is a member of the British Parliament from the Conservative Party. He's also the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, the committee that examines the decisions of the Foreign Office, that shapes the British foreign policy. And we began by asking what the British Defence Secretary termed the American withdrawal from Afghanistan a mistake. Why did he do that? And did he agree with that assessment? This is what he said.
I'm very glad he has said that, because I've been saying it for several months now. As chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I don't speak for the government, but my job is to hold the government to account and to review foreign policy. And this is something that we've been concerned about for a long time. So to hear the Defence Secretary agreeing is good. But sadly, the decision has still been taken and the US and allies are still leaving.
Were you not expecting America to withdraw from Afghanistan?
No, we were expecting it. And indeed, it started under the Obama administration, as you'll remember, when President Obama set out a timetable for withdrawal, and then President Trump began negotiations, including the negotiating the release of Taliban prisoners in 2020, I think it was, just over a year ago. And then what President Biden has done is he's accelerated that and actually completed the withdrawal. So while we were expecting it, the actual date was a bit of a surprise. And it's certainly extraordinary that we have prioritized the anniversary of 9/11 over the reality of the life of the Afghan people.
Now, the US has asked the Taliban to spare its embassy in Kabul. What do you make of America's deal-making with the Taliban that ignores the interests of the people of Afghanistan?
Well, I think the United States has made some major strategic errors in Afghanistan in the last 5 or so years. And indeed, the advice of Ambassador Khalilzad has led the Americans astray time and time again. And now his latest comment asking for the US embassy to be spared is an extraordinary thing to say at a time when 4.5 million civilians are at risk of murder at the hands of the Taliban.
And my final question is about Pakistan. The Afghan envoy recently briefed United Nations member states about the role that Islamabad is playing in supporting the Taliban's offensive. How do you assess Pakistan's role?
I haven't seen evidence of it, but what I'd be very keen to do right now is to be, for our government to be speaking to Islamabad about the importance of making sure that any government, any future administration in Kabul is only recognized if it adheres to basic human rights, including the rights of women and girls, and if it cooperates with the international community. The idea that we can find ourselves recognizing the kind of Taliban regime that we saw in 2000, 2001 is not acceptable. Now, we know that this Taliban regime at this stage, it certainly appears to be more interested in international recognition. Mullah Barada has been to see Wang Yi in Beijing, and I'm told he's been to see Minister Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov, in Moscow. So clearly they are interested in some form of international recognition, certainly more so than they were 20 years ago. And I hope that we can all use this leverage to make sure that the government of Afghanistan, whatever it is, whoever it is, has proper legitimacy. But I also hope that India, with its seat currently on the UN Security Council, of which it is this month the president, uses that position to advance the interests, not just of the Indian people, of course, but of everybody in seeking a solution to the government of Afghanistan. I have great faith in Minister Jaishankar, who is one of the most impressive diplomats and foreign ministers in the world today.
Tom Tugendhat, thanks very much for joining us here on WION.
Thank you.
The present state of play in Afghanistan has made a few things absolutely clear. Number one, the fall of Kabul is imminent, deal or no deal. Number two, the Taliban are soon going to be seen as a legitimate force in Afghanistan. And number three, an axis of evil is slowly taking shape, an axis that runs from the Taliban's headquarters in Kandahar to the offices of the PTI and the Pakistan Army in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, all the way to the Communist Party of China's power center in Beijing. You can call it a troika of tyranny and terror, a nexus that will upend the existing geopolitical dynamics in the region in Asia if it is not stopped in time. This may sound alarmist, but it's not. Like we told you, the Taliban is making rapid territorial gains. They control 18 out of 34 provincial capitals. Their next target is Kabul. And when Kabul falls, here's what China is going to do. Here's what China says it is going to do. It is going to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate ruler of Afghanistan. In other words, it is going to formalize its ties with the terror group and deal with it like it would deal with any other country. According to American intelligence, the Chinese military's assessments of the current situation in Afghanistan have prompted Communist Party leaders to prepare their strategy in advance. And this is their strategy: a formal recognition of the Taliban as the sole authority in Afghanistan. Now, this is hardly surprising. Last month, China rolled out the red carpet for the Taliban. The Chinese foreign minister met with a delegation of 9 Taliban representatives. This is Mullah Baradar with Wang Yi. Quick question. What does China gain by partnering with the Taliban? A lot of things. First of all, this is about Xinjiang, the province where China is persecuting Muslims. There is resistance, and Xinjiang shares a border with Afghanistan. Now, China fears there could be trouble on this front, and by recognizing the Taliban, China hopes that the Afghans won't support an armed rebellion in Xinjiang. Reason number two, Beijing's big power ambitions, the Belt and Road project. The Ashraf Ghani government in Afghanistan has said no to BRI grants. The Taliban may not, because they will need money, and China would be happy to spend it for access. Reason number three, managing Pakistan. You see, anti-China sentiments are on the rise in Pakistan. China hopes that by partnering with the Taliban, it can neutralize Taliban offshoots. Such groups have been attacking Chinese nationals and interests. And we've seen 3 such attacks in the last 4 months. The biggest one was in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, a bus explosion where 9 Chinese engineers were killed. First, Islamabad called it a mishap and blamed the blast on a technical failure. Beijing called it a bombing. And it asked Pakistan to punish the attackers. So now Islamabad agrees that it was indeed an attack. And guess who do they blame for it? India. The foreign minister of Pakistan held a press conference in Islamabad. He accused India's intelligence agency, WION, and Afghanistan's National Security Agency, NDS, for orchestrating the attack. On what basis? An investigation led by the Chinese. Listen to this.
हमारी की तहकीक के मुताबिक इस वाक़े के लिए अफ़गानिस्तान की सरज़मीन को इस्तेमाल किया गया। इसकी प्लानिंग, इसकी एग्जीक्यूशन के, इसके जिसकी मनसूबाबंदी के जो ताने बाने हैं, वो हमें वाज़े तौर पर NDS और रॉ का इसमें हमें नेक्सस दिखाई दे रहा है। और ये क्या चाहते हैं और ये नेक्सस ने ये हरकत क्यों की, हमारी नज़र में एलिमेंट्स हैं जो पाकिस्तान के अंदर चीन की जो इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हो रही हैं और हमारी जो आपस में बढ़ती हुई इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन है, वो उनको जिसे कहते हैं ना, वो उनको हज़म नहीं हो रही।
The Chinese and the Pakistanis investigate a terror attack on Chinese citizens in Pakistani soil. Of course, India had to be the villain. And this is coming from a terror state. The thing is, credibility has never been Pakistan's forte. And unfortunately for them, their own leaders exposed them. Last month, a prominent Pakistani lawmaker revealed how Taliban terrorists continue to roam freely in different parts of Pakistan. And this month, another prominent political voice has exposed Islamabad. Afrasiab Khattak, a former Pakistani senator, has said, and I quote, Pakistan is fully supporting the Taliban. The Taliban in a way is an instrument of Pakistan's policy of strategic depth in Afghanistan. I think Pakistan is very happy with the Taliban's advances. And I want to repeat one sentence so that it registers. This is what a Pakistani senator is saying. The Taliban is an instrument of Pakistan's policy of strategic depth in Afghanistan. How much more proof do world bodies need to establish that Pakistan and the Taliban are working hand in glove? How much more evidence do they need to understand that China wants to join this terror nexus and this new axis of evil? And its target, its first target, will be India. We're not done with Pakistan yet. As you all know, WION is banned by the government of Pakistan. But Islamabad can't help but follow our stories, it seems, and attack us on our reportage on Afghanistan. This includes both the Pakistani government and the Pakistani media. Let me show you some images. These are from the 7th of July, from the same show, when Pakistan's Geo News featured one of our reports in their segment attacking us for doing stories on the Taliban's onslaught. The story was about Taliban capturing the Salma Dam, a dam that India gifted to the Afghan government. We carried a detailed report on how the Taliban has captured areas surrounding the dam, and the Pakistan media called it fake news. And this was not a one-off instance. On the 12th of August, that is Thursday, Pakistan's Federal Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Fawad Chaudhry, appeared on the very same channel, and he cited reports from WION saying that we were pushing the sanctioned Pakistan trend, which now has more than 4 lakh tweets, by the way. He also said that we carried a fake report on how women in Pakistan are not safe. Watch this.
अभी और भी इसमें डाटा आना है और भी इसमें इश्यूज हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल कल मैंने वो नूर मकदम केस में जिक्र किया था कि WION टेलीविजन जो है उसने कितनी वीडियोस बनाई उस ट्रेंड के ऊपर और ये प्रोजेक्ट किया कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर औरतें महफूज नहीं है. अभी वो डाटा भी आना है और भी चीजें हैं जो बहुत सारी है.
Well, this is not the first time. Last year, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, had cited another report that we carried on Gravitas Plus about how Britain provides safe haven to billionaire fugitives. Take a look at this.
कि अभी मैं एक YouTube के ऊपर एक वीडियो देख रहा था कि किस तरह हिंदुस्तान में बता रहे हैं कि उनके बड़े बड़े अमीर लोग जिन्होंने पैसे चोरी किए हुए हैं वो सब लंदन में बैठे हुए हैं और उनके पास अरबों डॉलर्स की प्रॉपर्टीज़ और उनकी बैंक अकाउंट्स हैं, लेकिन हिंदुस्तान की हुकूमत के लिए बड़ा मुश्किल है वो पैसा वापस लाना. ये एक ऐसा बड़ा अजाब है. स्पीकर साहब, मैं सिर्फ सबकी इंफॉर्मेशन के लिए बताऊं कि गरीब मुल्क डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड गरीब होती जा रही है, अमीर मुल्क अमीर होते जा रहे हैं, क्योंकि हर साल अंदाजा लगाया जाता है कि 1000 अरब डॉलर गरीब मुल्कों से डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड से अमीर मुल्कों में जाता है.
Isn't that convenient? Quote us in your parliament when it suits you and attack us when it doesn't. Whatever it is, happy viewing. Meanwhile, Beijing is pursuing another sinister agenda. It is blocking the world from knowing the truth about the Wuhan laboratory. The WHO wanted to investigate the labs in Wuhan. Beijing has refused to give access or to cooperate or to offer raw data. Now, WHO scientists who went to Wuhan are speaking out. One of the investigators has now revealed how Chinese officials pressured the team to drop the lab leak hypothesis. Here's a report.
Back in February this year, Peter Mbarek shared the stage with Chinese scientists and declared how a lab leak is the least likely source of the Wuhan virus.
The findings suggest that the laboratory incident hypothesis is extremely unlikely and to explain the introduction of the virus into the human population.
6 months after that claim, Mbarek has come out with the truth. In an interview, he has revealed how the Chinese pressured WHO investigators in Wuhan. Mbarek has shared that the Chinese researchers actively work to block any scrutiny into the lab leak angle. They first rejected the idea outright, saying that a leak was impossible, but the WHO investigators insisted on including the possibility. In the end, China prevailed. After discussing the issue for 2 days, Chinese researchers allowed the mention of a potential lab leak in the report, but with a rider. WHO investigators were asked to not recommend any future study into it. This concession is now proving to be a big mistake, because China has rejected the demand for a second investigation into the origins, one that would have explored the possibility of a lab leak further. Earlier this year, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus angered Beijing. He refused to take the lab leak theory off the table. No one expected this. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Dr. Tedros had sided with Beijing on more occasions than one. He praised China's response to the outbreak and ignored the cover-up by Communist Party officials. Dr. Tedros hesitated in criticizing Beijing in public, even when WHO officials were struggling to get the right information from Beijing. But now, the WHO Director General is singing a different tune. He is pushing for another round of investigation in China. The new plan calls for an audit of laboratories in Wuhan that are near the areas that saw the first cases. The WHO even wants to investigate some science research institutions in China. On paper, the plan sounds good, but it is 20 months too late. And by refusing to participate, China has made sure the truth about the Wuhan lab remains buried. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
In the United States, a new survey by the country's Census Bureau provides some important insights into the changing racial makeup of the country. And the survey was unveiled on Thursday. It has triggered quite a storm among American conservatives. Here's why. The survey says that America's white population remains the largest ethnic group in the country, but it has shrunk by almost 9% over the last decade. It now accounts for almost 58% of the U.S. population. It's the lowest share on record. To put things in perspective, the number of non-Hispanic white people in the U.S. was 196 million in 2010, a little more than 63% of the total American population. In 2020, that figure shrank to 191 million. It now constitutes 57.8% of the U.S. population. This has apparently happened for the first time in American history. The survey further says that white Americans are no longer the dominant group in at least 4 places: Hawaii, New Mexico, District of Columbia, and California, America's most populous state. In fact, the steepest fall has happened here. Between 2010 and 2020, the white population in California has dropped from 40% to 34%. During the same period, the Hispanics, people from Spanish-speaking countries, became the largest racial group. They grew from a little over 37% to more than 39% over the decade. The conservatives say that these figures are alarming, that they represent a threat to white identity in the U.S. But the liberals say this only proves that the U.S. has become more diverse than ever. They say the white population is not shrinking, but shifting to multiracial identities, to people who identify themselves as belonging to 2 or more races. Let's look at some more figures. According to the survey, the number of people who identify themselves as multiracial has almost tripled. From 9 million in 2010, the figure has gone to 33.8 million in 2020. They now account for 10% of the U.S. overall. That's a rise of at least 276%. But does the growing diversity mean inclusivity? Far from it. Racism in the U.S. is still on the rise, and you don't need any surveys to prove this. There are enough and more figures. But for the sake of perspective, let me give you this one. According to an April 2021 survey, this year's survey, April, America is among the 10 worst countries for racial equality, 10 worst in the world. A total of 78 countries were assessed. The U.S. found itself on the 69th spot, finishing lower than China. According to another survey by the Northwestern University in Chicago on racism in America, 70% of black Americans said they continue to face racism. So did 45% Asians living in America and 25% Hispanics. What do all these figures tell you? that racism continues to be a reality in an America that likes to call itself multiracial? Is it because the white population in the US is shrinking? Is it because white Americans feel threatened that they will soon be in minority? Is it because they feel they will lose their identity? There are no easy answers to this question. It's got a lot to do with politics as well. All we can say is that the US has never been this polarized. And since we're talking about a census, here in India, socio-economic caste surveys on the cards, an exercise that will include collection of data from OBCs, other backward castes. And this hasn't been finalized yet, but the proposal is strongly being discussed. And even before it is conducted, there are apprehensions of all kinds. Some quarters feel the data will provide ammunition for the removal of reservation. Some feel it will be used to push for a hike in OBC quota. And there's a third quarter which says the only purpose will be to target welfare programs at backward castes in a better way. Well, whatever the case, we'll wait and see what the findings are if such a survey is conducted. And now to the biggest headline from Canada, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau could soon announce a midterm poll, a snap poll. The Canadian media is abuzz with reports that Trudeau wants to hold snap elections this September. That's almost 2 years ahead of schedule. A formal announcement is expected this weekend. Why exactly is Trudeau seeking this election so early? Will Canadians agree to this plan? Our next report explores.
It's time to invest in transit and roads.
You've got to trust Justin Trudeau to keep making news.
It depends on you.
The fresh-faced Prime Minister of Canada always manages to stay in the headlines with his never-ending photo ops. This time, for a change, he's in the news for politics. The Canadian media says that Justin Trudeau is planning a snap election this September, almost 2 years ahead of schedule. Reports say he will make the announcement on Sunday, along with a detailed explanation regarding his motives. Until then, all explanations float in the realm of possibility. But sources close to the Prime Minister have dropped some hints. They say the plan is to seek voter approval for his plans, secure a majority in Canada's House of Commons and get some crucial laws passed for his party. There's some merit in these arguments. The Trudeau-led Liberal Party government is currently in minority in the House of Commons. It has just 155 members of Parliament compared to a 119 in the opposition party, the Conservatives. Both parties are short of the 170 majority mark. Hence, Trudeau relies on other parties to push through legislations. In recent months, he has even complained about what he calls opposition obstruction, but is strictly against getting into a formal or informal coalition.
I intend to sit down with all party leaders in the coming weeks to talk about their priorities, about how we can work together to respond to the preoccupations that Canadians have from one end of this country to the other. They will be various and varied conversations, but I can tell you it is not in our plans at all to form any sort of formal coalition, formal or informal coalition.
The only option remaining before Trudeau is a snap election. But with another wave of the Wuhan virus gaining strength in Canada, it's hard to tell if he will find any supporters for his plan. Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, says the country is already amid a fourth wave. The opposition says that an election at a time like this would be selfish, unnecessary and risky. But can the opposition stop the Canadian Prime Minister? Not really. All Trudeau has to do is get the permission of Canada's Governor-General and direct her to dissolve the Parliament. Canadian watchdogs have started a petition to make the Governor-General, Mary Simon, turn down Trudeau's request. But such a refusal hasn't been seen in 95 years and seems highly unlikely. Canadians appear to be headed back to the polls less than 2 years since the last elections. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Mexico is suing the United States. Talk about a role reversal. Americans blame Mexico for everything, from their drug problem to illegal immigration. It's all because of Mexico. Well, turns out the United States is the one creating some of these problems. Thousands of American guns are trafficked into Mexico every year. They're used for gang wars and assassinations. But now Mexico has had enough. It has filed a lawsuit against big American gun companies. But will the US punish its favorite weapon makers? Where did this sinister romance begin? Our next report tells you all about it.
Drugs, guns, and gangs. That's Mexico in every Hollywood movie. And what Hollywood thinks, America believes. So Mexico became cartel country, where everyone has a gun and a target on their back. But where do these guns come from? Inside Mexico, there is only one legal gun shop. But cartels don't buy legal. They smuggle weapons from the world's biggest arms trafficker, the United States. Mexico wants to end this sinister trade. The government is suing America's biggest gun makers. What exactly is their case?
Están desarrollando diferentes modelos para el narco.
The arms companies are developing different models for narcos to use arms so that they buy them. They are very valuable. There are different types ranging from look to usage.
Mexico has a point. Take the example of this gun produced by Colt. It features the face and name of Mexican revolutionary Emiliano Zapata. Would be a hard sell to US gun fanatics, but not for Mexican hardliners. The lawsuit has been filed in Massachusetts. Mexico is seeking $10 billion in compensation. It may sound like a lot, but American guns have ravaged Mexican society. Between 2014 and 2018, hundreds of guns were recovered in Mexico. 70% of them traced back to the United States. In 2019, 17,000 murders were linked to trafficked guns. Mexican cartels are dangerous, but American guns make them deadly. If United States weapons are so troublesome, why doesn't the government crack down? Well, because it is good business. The US is the largest arms exporter in the world. They make up 37% of total sales. Who do they sell to? Just about anyone with money. America supplies 96 countries in the world. Not all of them are democracies. Some of them are not even governments. If you look at the biggest weapons makers of our times, the top 5 are American flagships like Lockheed Martin and Boeing. These companies have immense power over US politicians. These numbers will tell you why. In the last 2 decades, defense companies spent $285 million on political campaigns, another $2.5 billion on lobbying. Simply put, they bought American politicians. In return, they sanctioned wars and military deals. Over the years, this industry became powerful and entrenched. It employed thousands of workers, paid billions in taxes. War wasn't about politics anymore. It became a business. The United States government played along. They waged wars to satisfy this military-industrial complex. They sided in civil wars to sell weapons. Defense contractors got richer. The countries they invaded descended into poverty. This insatiable war machine is great business, but bad politics. America invaded Iraq, but failed to rebuild it. They invaded Afghanistan, but failed to win it. And now both countries are in shambles. This time, the world knows exactly who to blame. The United States and its capitalist appetite for war. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
We as a species love excuses. Late to office, blame it on traffic. Forgot your deadline, blame it on your imaginary relative. What if your clothes don't fit you anymore? Blame it on age and metabolism. You all heard about the middle age bulge. Around age 30, you start getting bigger. It becomes difficult to lose weight. Exercise suddenly becomes more difficult and pointless. We tend to blame this on metabolism. How do you define it? It's basically the process that keeps you alive. When you eat food, your body converts it into energy. We use that energy to walk, talk, run, basically live. This process is called metabolism. Until now, we thought it was inversely proportional to age. The higher your age, the lower your metabolism. As you get older, your metabolic rate drops. But you burn fewer calories, your body fat becomes stubborn, and suddenly you have a middle-age bulge. That's what we believed. Well, not so fast. Turns out metabolism does not work that way. Let me tell you about a new paper published in the Science magazine. The study included 6,500 people. Their ages varied from 8 days to 95 years. It's a pretty comprehensive study. What did it find? Metabolic changes can be divided into 4 stages of life, and listen to this very carefully, it affects you. Stage 1, from infancy to age 1, this is peak metabolism, almost 50% more than the adult rate. Babies burn energy fast. Stage 2, from age 1 to age 20. During this time, metabolism drops 3% every year. And here's the surprise, stage 3. Age 20 to age 60, no change in metabolism. The metabolic rate remains rock steady. And then we have stage 4, 60 plus. Here metabolism drops 0.7% every year. But the big headline is stage 3. Our metabolism does not change during middle age. Our body is spending the same amount of energy to sustain us. And this is a big moment in science. It changes our perception on nutrition, on weight loss, and the so-called middle age bulge. Guess it's not our age. It's just us. Let me explain this. For years, we thought obesity was because of slowing metabolism. Our body was using up less energy, so people were getting bigger. Now, this study disputes that theory. It says metabolism does not change from early adult life to middle age. Then what explains obesity? Deep down, we all know the answer. It's our lifestyle, the food we eat, the sugary drinks that we consume, the no-walk routine, the aversion to exercise, all of this contributes to obesity. And it's not your body that's making you fat. It's your attitude, perhaps. As one scientist put it, we have 2 energy crises in the world: the burning of fossil fuels and the burning of calories. That said, what does this research mean for nutrition? Should we change our diets? Well, that will depend on a couple of factors. For example, within the same age group, not everyone has the same metabolic rate. For some people, it was 25% more than average. For others, it was 25% less. And this difference had nothing to do with their body size or muscle growth. Researchers corrected the data for these differences. Then why the disparity? Well, that's the next frontier of this research. Why do some people have hypermetabolism? Why do others have slow metabolism? We're still awaiting those answers. But here's the one thing that we know. Age is not the villain. Stop blaming it. At least not middle age. This study effectively says 60 is the new 30. Your body uses the same energy at both ages. It busts a few other myths as well. For example, pregnancy and menopause had little impact on metabolism. So the question is it time to rewrite our textbooks? Well, some doctors certainly think so. This data could be a key to fighting diseases, to prescribing medication and diet patterns. It could possibly help human beings live longer. But remember, this is science, and more importantly, this is experimental science. Later research could disprove this theory as well. So some experts are prescribing caution. They say we need more data and we need more research. Maybe we do. But it's difficult to ignore the sheer scale of this study, not to mention the findings reflect common sense. Our lifestyles are indeed unhealthy. We consume more calories than we burn. So what if asking for more research is just another excuse to blame age and give ourselves a clean chit? Quite literally, some food for thought this weekend. We'll wrap on this, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.
where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.
America is a constant work in progress.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIOnews.com. World is one.
This week on the West Asia Post, the rise of two new regimes reignites a decade-old conflict. Iran and Israel are at loggerheads yet again. Attacks rise on the world's busiest shipping routes as a covert shadow war moves to the high seas. Also on the show this week, it is Code Red for Humanity as West Asia deals with climate change. And how are the children of Idlib celebrating Olympics? Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, only on WION. World is one.
WION, India's global voice. The channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
This week on WION Pit Stop, we trace the journey of two Indian automotive giants. The growth of Tata Motors and Mahindra is inextricably linked to the story of India. Watch Wheels of Change at these times, only on WION World is One.
Joe Biden, now the 46th president of the United States, has a full plate in front of him.
Afghanistan has been the heart of American military power.
In a clear warning to China, India's military has now taken control of the country for 1 year.
Made it concerned. It says that it's likely to miss by now. What was happening inside the virology lab in Wuhan?
One ship was able to freeze global trade.
We want love, we want peace, we want equality!
There are a traditional recipe, and it's really very delicious.
Is the pandemic making you anxious? Are you experiencing post-COVID stress?
A brain fog.
Hypersociability. I went public.
Numbers and mental.
WION is bringing mental health to the talking table.
Talking about mental health, okay.
The international experts answer all your questions.
It's the power of kindness.
Session 1, Lonely in the Lockdown.
How to stay mentally healthy.
Be patient with oneself.
Session 2, Stress and Students.
Students are